And yes, we are back here once again for the next episode of Survivor 50. This is episode 2. If you did not get a chance to watch my last podcast, I was intending to do initially, this is the hold on. That's better. I was intending to initially talk about both episodes in one video. I just didn't get around to watching episode 2 until now. So we're going to go ahead and do that. But before we do, I do want to once again bring on my guest. You saw him last night. He's back again. It's the Mike Jones. What's going on?
Hello.
What's up?
Just
Yeah.
life shit,
Life indeed. Life do be lifing. But yeah, so like I said, we're here to talk about episode 2 and kind of give our thoughts on it, as well as we're going to talk a little bit about Colby's journey on the show so far. And then, like I said, at the end, we will randomize who we will be talking about next. Before we do that, though, Mike, just general thoughts. What did you think of this episode overall?
This episode, one of the funniest episodes of Survivor ever. It was giving. There was a lot to like here. Some complaints, but we'll get into that. But overall, I think we're 2 for 2 so far.
No, absolutely. I think that, this episode really for me solidified this is going to be a really fucking great season. I will say, I do think it's pretty clear at this point who is and isn't going to be like big characters this time around, because unlike episode 1, there are a lot of people we don't see that much of. And I think we're starting to get a better sense of like who is not going to be as much of a focus. But I mean, again, that could absolutely change. But
you never know. I mean, if you were to go off the first few episodes of 47, you would have thought Genevieve.
I was actually just about to say that. Yeah. So yeah, because I've seen some people who do power rankings and things like that, like kind of knock certain people because they weren't in this episode, but we'll see how it really goes. But anyway, we're gonna try to keep things moving a little bit because like I said, there's not as much to talk about in this one, but there's still quite a bit that did go down. So we're gonna go ahead and start off talking about Vatu here. And we see, once again, Genevieve is just really devastated with what's happening with Kyle. She feels with what happened to Kyle, she feels very guilty even thinking about the game implications with how good of a guy he is. And Q's talking about how Kyle wanted one of them to win, and with one of them out, Q wants to pull in Rizzo. And so he decides to let him know about his lost vote. And I think this is a great spot for Rizzo to be. He just made amends with Colby. He didn't realize he was making amends with Colby, but that's kind of what happened.
Okay, it's the one-sided beef.
Right, the one-sided beef. And he goes from someone that, people were kind of annoyed by to now potentially being in this alliance. Do you feel like this is a good place for Rizzo?
I mean, the fact that this kid who 25 years old, on the last season, the fact that he's found himself in this kind of power position to really swing the tribe one way or the other, and these other players are looking at him as a resource. Good for Rizzo. What he does with it is yet to be seen. But, I think in his confessional, he said, he wants to be, Rizzo the player, not just, the RIZGOD. So I think he's well on his way here.
Yeah, he's doing some good work. I think, something that Rizzo I'm impressed by is that he is recognizing that, what he did wrong last time. He has this confessional where he kind of talks about how last time he maybe did a little bit too much. And he's kind of trying to dial that down a bit here. He wants to kind of focus on relationships and not do this whole thing, and not just be too hyper and things like that. And I think it is generally working for him. So I'm excited to see where Rizzo goes here. So we check in with Sela and we see that Christian talks to Joe, and you want to talk about one of the funniest scenes.
Oh my God.
I gotta say, Christian might have stole the show with this episode for me. I'm becoming a really big fan of Christian Kubicki, and I'm hoping I get to watch his season very soon, because I'm very much liking what we're getting with him. So basically, he has to leave abruptly. Joe's worried this is about a spinal injury, and then realized he likely just shit his pants. We get this whole segment where he says he let us know this is not the first time this happened on Survivor, and now he's entered the Pantheon. He's dead, and his wife is going to divorce him for it. This is just this is just what we need more of, honestly, on Survivor.
No, for real. And I think these kind of moments where it takes a break from, the game bodiness, and I think a big complaint a lot of people have, myself included, with New Era Survivor, it's like if you watch some pre-merge episodes of some seasons, it's either people talking about advantages, finding advantages, talking about other people's advantages, talking about other people, talking about other people's advantages. And it just gets very monotonous after a while. So any scene that just kind of these character moments makes the show more fun, in my opinion, and you kind of get out of the game bodiness that Survivor can fall into nowadays. So and if it was going to happen to anybody, it was going to be Christian.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, he, again, I have only watched, him on this season. I can already see why people were so eager to see him back, because he is just such a fun character to watch so far. All right, so let's get to this reward challenge, because some interesting stuff happens here, where I'm gonna answer that right now. So we see everyone is heartbroken to hear what happened to Kyle. Ozzy talks about how he kind of thought that he would be medevaced, and he really is feeling for Kyle here. And basically coaches asked about Kyle and instead decides to take the time to tell the truth about what happened in the challenge. He says that so it seems like, it's going to be this really sentimental moment. Everyone's talking about Kyle. Coach decides to make this about himself. And he goes on about how, he wants to tell the truth about what happened in the challenge. He says he's the same coach they've always seen. Ozzy has this great line where he's like,
he walked right into that. He teed that thing up so good for Ozzy. Right there.
And then Ozzy goes you are exactly the way that you've always played this game, at least the last time I saw you. And it's this great back and forth. Apparently this was a lot longer of a confrontation than we saw on the show. I think I heard multiple press that were there basically say that this is one of the most intense fights they've seen in a very long time. So yeah, this was crazy to watch, and I don't know how far either of these two are going to get at this point, but I need them to get as far as they possibly can, because I think this could get very fun very fast.
Yeah, I mean, just the whiplash of anytime there's a medevac, especially in this case with the returning season, you have that emotional moment of people kind of processing it as a group, and especially with Camilla there, it's this kind of emotional moment of her explaining, the relationship with Kyle and then the Ozzy thing, and then just coach taking the time to, how can I make this all about me? It's just so good. And it's if it was anybody else, it would be ridiculous, but it's coach, and we just expect these things out of him. It's just, and yeah, I did hear the same thing. The fight went on longer, and it's unfortunate we didn't see more of that, but it is what it is. But it was still just absolutely hilarious, and just
for sure. I thought
great TV moment.
Yeah, this was ridiculously entertaining. I thought I had a really great time watching this back, especially again the fact that coach is asked to say nice things about Kyle. He's like, nope, I'm not here to do that. I thought that was crazy to watch. It felt very coach to do that. And you're right, where it's anyone else, it would be yeah, fuck this person for kind of making this all about themselves. But for coach, it's expected. So I definitely really enjoyed seeing that go down. All right, so we get to the reward challenge. Basically, they're going to leap off a platform. They smash a tile, releasing a key. They're going to make their way towards a series of balance beams, swimming to the finish. Another player is then going to dive down and retrieve 2 rings, and it's then a race to release 3 rings and 3 targets. And the first 2 tribes, they're going to win a massive camp improvement kit with 2 hammocks and a tarp. We see Camilla elects to sit out of this challenge, and we see in this great comeback, Sela actually wins the reward against Kahlo. Vatu also ends up winning this. So really good for Sela. We get this moment with Coach where he says that every word he said when he called out Ozzy was completely intentional. And I think he says something like the adversary becomes the enemy. I don't know.
I don't even know what the hell that means.
Yeah, he had this crazy quote. Again, at this point, Coach is just saying things to say things. But I really enjoyed watching it. But yeah, hold on one second.
Well, while you're doing that, I mean, even the challenge, fun little challenge. My girl Savannah diving off the thing, having that cool shot of swimming
Mhm.
underwater. Just love to see that. But reward challenges, rewards, not always the most interesting part of things. And I think especially nowadays, some of the camp
Yeah.
rewards is just kind of like, all right, whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. I thought it was very interesting to watch. All right, so we go to Vatu here, and we get quite a big focus on Aubrey in this episode, which is understandable, considering what happens. But basically, she talks about how she kind of feels like she's in the middle of everything. Everyone's kind of this bunch of lunatics, and there's this cast of characters in a tangled web. She can't really tell who is who and really what's going on at all, which kind of tracks. I feel like she's been so out of like most of the strategic conversations. So she talks about how she has a pretty exhausting relation with the game that she loves, but it's so hard with how hard she has to manage her energy expenditure. She didn't do great with it in Koran, and she nearly crashed out, but she knows that this is not lose it to Survivor on a dime. And we'll really have to cover it at this point. I think that she's in a very interesting position where she's not really in like the majority of things. But I mean, what happens to her later on this episode, I think could definitely like turn things around for her.
Yeah, I'm worried about her. Like, I'm just rooting for her for like the sake of like, I don't know what she's gonna do if she like does bad again, because she just seems like it's just really important to her to do good this time. So like, I am rooting for Aubrey. She's kind of like that like star athlete that that once that whatever sport that was like at one point really good and is just trying to have that one final run to try to recapture the excellence that they had when they were at their peak. Because she came super close to winning wrong, but some people actually say she probably deserved it, and then just progressively did worse from there, and then being on edge of extinction and really kind of crept flaming out early and not handling that well. It just seems like she's just that like MLB slugger getting up hoping for that just one last home run, and I hope she gets it just for her sake, because I'm worried about her. She just seems like she's carrying a lot of weight this season.
Yeah. I think that she has the potential to kind of be that like silent but deadly type player where it's like people aren't really paying attention to what she's doing, and then she like really just kind of starts to like slowly gather information of what's going on and like really ends up making a name for herself. So I'm interested to see what ends up happening with Aubrey. But Genevieve is really nervous about Aubrey because she feels like, she's really paying attention to her bag, and so she thinks, oh shit, Aubrey could actually maybe have a boomerang idol. And well, she doesn't yet, but she might later on. I don't know.
Yeah, good instincts there by Genevieve. Just a day or two early.
Right. So the Alliance goes through the contents of her bag. We get this really funny segment where basically each of them have to fill this role where Stephanie's distracting her. Genevieve is searching through it alongside Colby. Hugh is the lookout, but unfortunately they don't really find much of anything. At least right now they haven't found anything.
Well, and you want to talk about the tribe dynamics and kind of knowing more about it this season than we do normally. What does it say for Aubrey, the fact that literally everyone else on the tribe is taking part in going through her stuff in some capacity?
Exactly.
Except, everyone's in, so she is very clearly on the bottom of this group.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, no, she definitely is not in I think Aubrey is definitely in an interesting spot right now where I really do think, especially what happens at the end of this episode, and as well as what's going to be happening after this, I think things could definitely turn around for her. So I think she's on the rise a bit. She's just not quite there yet. Unfortunately. So
no, but I think again though, and then what I'm loving with this season so far is it's showing a lot more. Like, yeah, they're still explaining stuff, they're still confessionals saying what's going on, but it's not, we don't need these over the top, overly sentimental, sappy moments. Just Aubrey, just that few little moments of her just spoiler alert, getting the boomerang idol later and just seeing how much that means to her, and just her kind of expressing how important this season is to her. Just these little character moments do so much more to tell the story than what we normally get in the new era.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think they're doing a really good job, I think, of really fleshing everybody out and giving us a really good sense
For the
of
most part. Yeah.
yeah, for the most part. There's definitely some like the Tiffany's and Camillas who aren't really getting much of anything. And Angelina as well, not really getting much, except for Q just not enjoying her at all. Which we'll talk about that right now. The only other thing we really get with Batu is this moment where Q is really just feeling like Rizzo is very lazy. He's not contributing anything to camp, and basically, Rizzo is not really happy with this because he feels like we didn't really do any of this last time. We kind of just strategized around. We didn't have to do all this other shit. Like he doesn't, he didn't want to focus on it then. He's not going to focus on it now. So he doesn't really understand why people are so focused on like, camp life and things like that. But Q is pretty annoyed because he feels like they're all talking. No one's pulling their weight aside from Colby and Stephanie. And Rizzo, Aubrey, and Angelina are just sitting around. Angela in particular, he finds to be a statue.
Oh, he went hard. And Angelina?
Yeah, I thought this was a really fun moment from Q, but we'll see if this really amounts to anything.
Yeah, and I think because Q's kind of like aligned with these old school players, like obviously your Colby's and your Stephanies are going to put in the camp work ethic, but I think these new era players, I mean, like I guess with the exception of Q, I think they realize just how much it doesn't matter as much as it did back in the day. Because I mean, like we know, obviously, the there's a swap next episode. It's like, why are we going to put all this effort into building a shelter, doing this, doing that? When we're just going to swap. We could swap in like a day or so. So it's just, a nice little kind of classic throwback style scene, but it's still just fun to watch.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens here. It's gonna be interesting to see how this goes down. But I thought it was a very funny moment. So we go to Kahlo here, and not a ton to talk about with Kahlo, other than we see that Jonathan is really like hyping himself up at this point. He feels like he's playing a much better game. He wants to come across as one-dimensional, but he feels like he is playing differently. So he's not as loyal this time around, although he feels very close to Coach with how much he loves adventure and how far he can push himself. He's especially mesmerized by how strong he is in the water. And we see the Coach ends up getting this cramp in his leg, but thankfully he's all right. And he talks about how he thought he was physically okay, but he would have died if it wasn't for Jonathan. Yeah, really,
just more coachisms right there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it literally was just a cramp in his leg. Like, I think he would have been fine, but good way for Jonathan to kind of get in there with him. And I do think they are somewhat similar personality types, so that's definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, it's just hilarious. Coach being like, oh, it's like it's like your dad telling you stories of like I had to walk 15 miles to school uphill, but just would love it. I love Coach.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Really, really funny moments, how that went down. The only other thing to really talk about here is that people are really not vibing with Chrissy at this point. We saw in the last episode that Chrissy was kind of somewhat like doing like, I think a more subtle version of what Jenna was doing by targeting D and really like throwing her name out there. And it seemed like it was starting to gain traction, but people are not loving Chrissy at this point. They feel like she's a little too maternal. They don't really like the way that she's going about things. And Charlie is actually starting to like grow a liking of her, kind of similar to Maria, but Charlie's also recognizing that like,
how'd that work out? How'd that work out for you, Charlie?
Right. Like if the majority's not cool with it, I'm not either. So I don't know. We'll have to see what happens here. I think it's going to be
and my concern for Chrissy is like there was no retort from her. It was everyone complaining about Chrissy and how she's bossy and demanding.
Right.
And there wasn't like a confessional from Chrissy to kind of be like maybe paint a different picture than that. So that makes me concerned for Chrissy. She might not be super long for this world.
Yeah.
When really her whole edit right now is no one likes her.
Yeah.
But her edit on Heroes on Triple H towards the end was nobody likes her either, and she almost won. So
yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I think that Chrissy is in an interesting spot right now because I think that she thinks she's in a better position than she is. But I also think that obviously this tribe is going to be fine considering what happens. But we'll have to see with what's going down next week, how that really does impact her. So we'll see how that ends up going down. So yeah, so we get to Sela here, and again, there's a lot to talk about on Sela. We see that Savannah's talking to Rick, and she knows that like she messed up at this point. She knows that it was a mistake to lie about stuff, and so she's asking how much trouble she got herself into. Rick is talking to her about how it's just really hard to buy into what she said, and asks if she really has that advantage, and she's just continuing to say no. So Savannah is talking about how, she's played a more honest game last time, but this time around, she just feels like she hasn't really been able to establish relationships yet. So she's really not sure what's actually, like, she's really not sure, what to do. And I get it from Savannah, where it's like you don't have that person. She had Rizzo last time, and she felt pretty good with the majority of her tribe. But again, like we said last night, like if you're going to lie about it, you can't just like half lie. You got to just go full sail and say that, that Colby won and you didn't get anything, because I think if she had done that, she'd be in a much better spot right now.
Yeah, she definitely overplayed her hand, like we said last night, that it just, because nobody I think in any new era season has won a journey and come back with nothing. Mm-hmm. So I think especially in a returning cast, if people like smell the faintest whiff of something sketch, they're going to try to snuff it out. And I think for her, she did not do herself any favors here. And then the problem is, it's like, well, what do you do at that point? You can't just come back and be like, yeah, I lied, guys. Sorry. It's just a little, I think way too much of an overplay by our girl, Savannah.
Yeah, I get somewhat what she was trying to do, but I also feel like a way for you to build trust is to either, like I said, completely lie about it or just be open to somebody about it. But the fact that she wasn't, it's really not great for her. But there's a lot of focus on Joe in this episode. And, we talked about last night how Joe really only has like one style of playing. And that really rings true in this episode. Like, you want to talk about someone who is just so inflexible and generally has no other way to play the game. Look no further than Joe here, because basically this kicks off with, Ozzy going over how, there's, possible options and things like that. And he talks about potentially forming this group with the two of them and Joe. Rick is really not down for this. He feels like Ozzy's at the bottom of his alliance and he would want to go for him, but he also really would want Joe to go because he feels like he's going to be a lot more freed up because, we know that Joe is all about honor and integrity, and he's really starting to get annoyed that other people are not down for it. And we see there's a moment where Joe notices Rick whispering over to Savannah, and he just straight up like calls him out and is like, "What did you say to Savannah?" And so Rick's like, she was just saying that he was talking strategy and wanted her to be a part of it. And Joe knows that this isn't true. He feels like he had such an awkward response. And we've already talked about how we're not the biggest fans of Joe, but what did you think of this moment?
Just weirdly aggressive. And I think he'd even said something about like he's got like PTSD or whatever from 48. It's just like he's like so pissed that his style of gameplay wasn't well received the first time around. I feel like he's trying to double down and be like, no, I'm going to prove that I can actually win this game the way I want to play. It's like, it's weird. I got like weird vibes from Joe this episode. He just seemed like weirdly aggressive towards people. Like it just, and lucky for him, he's good in challenges. Otherwise, I think he would have been in a lot more trouble.
Yeah,
we can get into it. We talk about the scramble, but he's lucky he's good in challenges.
I was really thinking for a while that like this was gonna land on Joe because Joe is just just someone that everyone's just really perturbed by, and just feel like they can't really play the game around him, and that's kind of the case. It's like the problem is like, sure, what Savannah did is really bad, but when you have somebody like Joe in the game who basically like stops you from doing anything that isn't the way he wants you to do it, it's very difficult to play the game at that point. So I really didn't know what direction this was going to go in. So he does go to Suri and Christian, and he feels like maybe they should just like leave him out of this vote entirely. But Suri kind of talks about how, he's going to feel left out. Christian, who, like I said, I think is in like a really great spot right now. He talks about how they need to basically rotate him and see what he's thinking. They could potentially leave him out, but got to make sure no one gets sniped, as he calls it, a jotation. So yeah, that's basically the
Well, the
plan.
scene of Christian like rocking him in the hammock, like
Oh
really.
my god.
Honestly, great social game by Christian there. I think Christian handled him a lot better than Devins did, where it just turned into an argument between the two of them, which I do hope to see more of because it's kind of funny. I think Christian was kind of able to simmer him down a little bit, and who knows, that may have been the catalyst why he ended up staying.
Yeah, I think Christian recognized like what he needed to do in this moment, in the sense of like, sure, Joe is like this loose cannon, but the way that you handle loose cannons is approaching them calmly and not being as direct as like Devins was. So I think he knows how to talk to people, and I think that's going to get him really far.
Yeah, and having someone like him on having someone like Joe in your back pocket, and then someone who's just so dead set on being this amazing, honorable, then that's someone who's not going to vote you out.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think for Christian, good gameplay there. However, too, you know, I don't know if you want to get into the immunity challenge before we talk about the scrambling.
No, so there's one more thing I do want to bring up before we get to that immunity challenge, and that is what happens with Christian here, because he's just kind of roaming around and finds the boomerang idol. And so now he's going to try to figure out the best way to play this. He's kind of unsure what to do, but he wants to but ultimately he comes to the conclusion he kind of want to mark someone to take them out, but he has to figure out who's going to keep it the quietest, and decides to give it to Aubrey. So Aubrey has the idol. It's a really funny scene because she's like overjoyed about it, like, oh my God, someone felt good enough with me to give me this idol. And then you just cut to Christian being like, you know, sayonara, Aubrey. Like he is very much trying to target her here. And I'm very interested to see how this goes down because, as we expressed, Aubrey's not in a great spot right now.
She's not, but then at the same time now she has an idol, and I'm sure, and right. Aubrey's enough of a good player to know that she's not in a good spot. So, you know, that scene though with Aubrey is just kind of like, damn, I really need her to do good because I'm scared of what's going to happen if she doesn't.
No, yeah, definitely. Because I think that, you know, if she doesn't end up doing well here, that idol could definitely be like a real.
No, I'm talking for her like mental health because she looked like she's giving like just crash out vibes.
Yeah.
So, but I think good move by Christian though. I mean, worst case scenario, let's just say she doesn't go and she plays and saves herself or still has it. Yeah. You tell her I'm the one who gave it to you and find a way to prove that. And then again, that's someone else that you have that's going to be, you know, you don't tell her obviously like, yeah, I gave it to you because I want you to go. You tell her like, oh, I gave it to you because I want to work with you. So
no, exactly.
I think Christian has done a good job of giving himself a lot of options in this game.
Yeah, he's really in a great spot here because, like, obviously he has, you know, what he's got going on with Devins. He's in a good spot with Suri, but he also is someone that, you know, Emily feels good with him. He seems like he's got Joe in his back pocket now. Like he's kind of set on this tribe. I would probably go as far as say he might be the best person, like he might be in the best spot right now on his tribe. So really, again, just impressed by what Christian's doing so far. So we'll have to see. All right, so we'll get to the immunity challenge real quick. Basically, each tribe had 3 teams of 2 who sprinted the jungle 1 pair at a time to retrieve 3 heavy snakes. Each team then had to drag their snake back through an obstacle course, and then after all 3 snakes had been retrieved, 3 contestants used 3 ropes tied to a ring to then maneuver a ball along a windy snake table. The first 2 teams to finish then won immunity, and ultimately, it's a very tough race. Kalu and Batu, once again, they win immunity, so Sela goes back to Tribal. And we'll talk a bit about the deliberation here. The main things to talk about is, you know, Joe and Devins once again, just continually hashing out, just continually going back and forth about what was said and it becoming a lot worse between them to where I honestly thought Joe was going to go at this point with just how much chaos he was causing in this moment. And it seemed like Emily was like fully on board to do that too. So I was kind of thinking maybe he was going to go here. We'll talk about what really ends up happening. But we see Emily is kind of thinking maybe doing Ozzy. Cirie very much talks her out of it and pivots towards like Savannah and Joe. So it very much is between those two. We also see Ozzy give his extra vote to Cirie, which I thought was interesting. The way that
Cirie's first ever advantage that she actually could use.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we'll see how that goes down.
Well, and listening to like post game press, sorry to interrupt, it seems like Cirie was really the one that kind of put it on Savannah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Cirie, obviously, like we said, is in a good spot strategically and socially in this tribe. And I feel like she sees Savannah as more of a threat there. And one thing about Cirie is she's going to want to keep someone like Joe in the game causing chaos because then that's one less person that, people want to get rid of over her. And I think, Cirie's enough of a gamer where she can see somebody instead of seeing them as the threat right now, she sees them as the threat they are down the road. So I think, that's why we see Savannah end up going. But for me personally, I don't know about you, but it felt like the Savannah boot kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. Like I didn't feel for sure that it was going to be her, let alone like a unanimous vote on her.
No, I agree with you. Like so I've seen this episode twice now, sort of. The first time I watched it was kind of like half watching it. But even on a rewatch, like it really does come as a shock when it's Savannah here because it does kind of seem like we're really focused on the Joe and Devins of it all. Savannah ending up being the one to go, I think is a little bit shocking. And I it's not a complete shock because of what ended up happening, but it just seemed like people were getting so annoyed by Joe and he was just continually rubbing people the wrong way that it really seemed like maybe Savannah's going to be okay here. But unfortunately, that's just not the case.
Unfortunately, but it's sad to see Savannah go because I mean she was just so damn entertaining and so fun to watch. I don't know what the right word is, but we haven't seen too many people like her who kind of lean into the villainy side in the new era. So she was a breath of fresh air last season and was excited to see her play again. And unfortunately, she got sniped too early. But you know what? She's got her $1 million to go cry into. I'm sure she's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it sucks to see Savannah go out. And honestly, she was always, I think, going to have difficulty here coming off of her winning, and literally just jumping right back into this. It always was going to be hard for her to really get far. I definitely did not expect to lose her this early, though. I thought for sure she was going to at least like make a swap, maybe even get to like early merge, and then she was going to go. I definitely did not expect her to go out this early. I think, unfortunately, she just was kind of in a rough spot here. She wasn't really able to connect with as many people. She had people that she maybe could have formed something with. I know she said that she felt okay with Cirie. She maybe wanted to do something there, but it just never fully materialized for her. And I think, unfortunately, she just kind of ended up getting fucked. And then I think her lying about, what ended up happening at that journey, I think really did kind of just like, was like the knife in the coffin for her.
Yeah, I think the worst thing she could have done was give them a reason to be suspect of her because I think she started out great by being honest and whether she had to or not, telling the tribe that she won, which again is already bad enough as it is from people's perspective. Then I know she said she felt good with Jenna, then Jenna goes, and then it's just kind of like, now you lied about having the advantage. And it's just, I think just she gave people too much of a reason and, it sucks to see her go.
Yeah, it really does. Like I said, I think that, she just needed that one person to really connect with, and she just wasn't able to find it. So sucks to see her go. She seemed devastated, understandably. I mean, again, just back to back like that. I can't even imagine how that must feel. But now D is the only winner in the game. And the person
for real.
Like the person who I thought was going to be like the most like in trouble is now going to outlast all the other winners. So it's gonna be interesting to see how that goes down. So the big thing to talk about before we do talk about Colby for a little bit is the fact that they are swapping next round. I was not expecting it to happen so early, but I mean, on a cast of 24, you do gotta kind of keep things moving. So
what I think too, in returning tribes too, you might want to be swapping because you don't know who was possibly talking before the season started. So I think you kind of need to keep people on their toes a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, exactly. So we'll see how that ends up going down. But now, we are going to go ahead and talk about Colby here a little bit, kind of talk about his journey. Now, I will go ahead and start off with how I feel about Colby from what I've seen on Australian Outback. I will say that is not my favorite season of the Survivor seasons I've
it's
watched.
not a lot of people's favorite seasons.
Yeah,
So.
I find it very dragged out. I find it to not be the most exciting. And Colby is certainly not somebody that really stuck out to me that much. I found him to be a guy, he's good at challenges, he wins challenges, he's kind of protected through that. He gets to the end of the game and he doesn't really have a lot to say about him, and he doesn't really have a lot to say as a result, because of like he doesn't really have a lot to say in the end against Tina, and that's ultimately why he doesn't end up winning. He just doesn't have much going on besides him winning challenges. So
the big thing was him trying to play the hero card, and I think you did see that a lot. And at the time, I mean, like, okay, I was 8 years old when the season aired, so I wasn't like in depth on like how things work. But like as I've followed the show throughout the years, it's like one of the big things I think he was trying to avoid was being as negatively perceived as Rich was on season 1, which I think is a big reason why he ends up taking Tina to the end, because he wanted to not be seen as someone who took the easy way out. And I think a lot of what he was doing got caught up in that. I mean, obviously, the relationship with Jerry that he has throughout the season is kind of like the main storyline that he has, and it's him at his most interesting, and the seasons at its most interesting when Jerry's there. But those two being like so attached in their stories, just being so intertwined through 3 seasons, was kind of their main thing there. But I think a lot of what Colby was doing was trying to be the hero. And obviously, he makes the 3-person alliance with Keith and Tina at the Mitchell vote, and votes him out, and that's this big kind of game-changing move where those 3 end up becoming the final 3. There's the merge where he kind of tries to get the Kucha tribe to put votes on him because he knew he had none of the pre-merge, so he kind of, I don't want to say he douches it up a little bit, but he tries to be a little more abrasive, try to make sure he's the one that gets the votes from Kucha so that they can get Varner out, which is always a good thing.
Always.
So I think he was trying to be, the hero and I think his edit was a lot of that, but he was super, super popular at the time. And, that's one thing you can't really deny. And he kind of was, the main hero of the series for a long time.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think he fills that role well of like the guy that's just kind of like the hero. He's honest, he's loyal. He was kind of the Joe, but not as forceful about it, where it's like this is the way he's playing the game. It's not like Joe where like he needs you to play the game that way, and if you're not, he's gonna like side-eye you. It's like this is just how I play. I'm honorable, I'm straight up, and that's just kind of how I go about it. I guess what I'll ask you
until he votes out Jerry. Besides that,
right? Yeah. So outside of Australian Outback, like, what would you say about like Colby's legacy?
Honestly, he has a complicated one for me because it's like he was this challenge beast in Australian Outback who set the record for immunity wins in a season, which no one's broken. I mean, people have tied it, but no one's broken it since then. I mean, obviously the challenges back then weren't as physically demanding and strenuous as they are now. But even then, still, winning 5 is winning 5, regardless of if you're, doing puzzles or obstacle courses or whatever. He still no one broke it. So then you go into All Stars, and he's kind of just, I don't want to say he was just there, but he was kind of a little bit lost in the shuffle because the main focus on the Mogo Bogo tribe was really Lex. And he was kind of like getting up this, and Lex and Rich were kind of the main focus of what was going on over there. And, Colby goes kind of like late pre-merge, but I mean, I can't remember a ton of really what he did, but he was a name that you just had to have on All Stars, with him just being this massive character coming out of Australian Outback. I mean, my All Stars knowledge is a little bit rusty, but I can't really remember a ton of what he did there. I mean, I think he was in a pretty good position.
Mhm.
Maybe he doesn't go when he does. He probably still go even with Kathy is there. But I think a lot of the big threats were kind of marked for death in All Stars, whether you were
Yeah.
a winner or you were someone who almost won. So
Mhm.
then he goes away for a while. We come back for Heroes versus Villains, and he was one of the kind of the bigger names going into the preseason. And I think that season being the last impression we had of Colby coming into this one, I think it's
Yeah.
the reason a lot of people were sour on him, where he just
Mhm.
did not play well. He was just a flop in challenges, and it just kind of
Yeah.
constantly felt like he was Charlie Brown trying to kick the football, and it would just move every time he would do it. Like he just didn't win any challenges. He was on the Heroes tribe, and he was originally in the Minority Alliance there, and it just felt like nothing went right for Colby. And it's just weird seeing him go from like challenge beast to this underdog. Then, but I think Colby's real legacy for me is he's the OG hero. He was Captain America on Australian Outback, and I think however he goes about this season is going to kind of really dictate for me personally, how his story ends, because I obviously don't see him playing again after this season. But he's bland for some people. For me too, personally, I think his most interesting for me was when he was at his lowest in Heroes versus Villains. There's the classic confessional of him, telling the rest of the Villains tribe that he's basically done, and then it's kind of a more emotional scene of him not really ready to quit yet and still trying. So for me, he's at his most interesting when he's not trying to be, the hero. And now, I think he's the dad of the tribe, and the potential story with him and Rizzo is interesting.
Yeah.
So I was interested to see how Colby's story wraps up here in this season.
Definitely. I think, from what you're saying, I think Colby is a character that kind of needs a redemption of sorts, where it's like he didn't end the show in a great place, where it's like 50 can kind of be that season where it's like finally we'll get to see like a Colby that's a little bit more interesting. I'm liking what we're seeing of him so far on 50, so we'll have to see.
Oh yeah,
how that continues to go.
Yeah, and it kind of feels like he's like really kind of studied up a little bit. Like he doesn't seem as out of his element as I thought he was going to.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be interesting. I'm kind of hoping he sticks around for a little while. And I mean, and that's the old school fan in me, especially now that Jenna left. Kind of the golden age rep sticking around for a little bit. Hopefully, but we'll see.
For sure. All right. Well, that's Colby, and that's pretty much all we're going to discuss here. Before we do that, though, there is one last order of business, which we will be, from this point forward, typically doing at the end of every single podcast here. We're going to discuss who are we talking about next, because obviously we got a new episode on Wednesday, but we also need to talk more about, one of these players of a season that I haven't watched. So I got the wheel pulled up right here, as you can see. These are all people whose seasons I have not watched yet. So we're going to go ahead and spin it, and we will see who our next person will be that we'll be talking about. And it looks like we're talking about Stephanie. Okay, so we're staying in chronological order. We'll see how this goes. I heard her journey is not the most exciting to talk about, but
no, there's you can squeeze some juice out of that one.
Okay. Well, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so next episode I will be on with my next few guests. We will be talking about Stephanie, so look forward to that. But other than that, really enjoying the season so far. I think, like I said, they're doing a pretty good job of giving us a good idea of all the different dynamics and stuff like that. So I'm enjoying what we're really getting. And I think the season's in a really good place. I think it's been a really strong start overall, and I'm excited to see more of where it really goes. But Mike, before we do end things out here, anything you want to say, maybe about chocolate milk?
No chocolate milk, but I will say so far I am very much enjoying this season. Thank you for having me, Kevin, for 2 episodes. It's been fun being able to sit here and talk about the old schoolers. Obviously, I didn't get to do all of them. I'm a little jealous, but the 2 OGs. I don't really have anything to plug, but thank you for having me. But
yes, of course. Been a very fun time. But other than that, guys, that's pretty much for this video. If you guys do enjoy this podcast, I have a ton of other TV and movie related content. So if you're interested in any of that, definitely consider checking my channel as well as subscribing. Love to be a part of all of that. But other than that, guys, over this video, hope you guys enjoyed it. And we will see you guys later. Okay, bye.
Bye.